Honey, good morning. Oh, look at this. This effect makes my hair look like it's disappearing over here. Look, I'm disappearing. So we don't have anybody in except our band office here. And I guess, Doris, is that you with who? You with who? Wiikwemkoong Heritage Organization. Who's there? Nobody's responding. So Bentley, unfortunately, like I said yesterday, I was not able. I just don't want anyone to come in. So whoever is letting people in, if it's not going to be me, just until I just have this quick little conversation here. I'm hoping it's just us. Who's the fifth person? There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Who's our participants? Okay, yeah.
I think it's just us, Carrie.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe
So
4 people.
Okay, that's good. I see that there's somebody in the waiting room, but so I wasn't able to join yesterday. My apologies on that. And then when we left in the morning, you were saying that you were going to be speaking about 1850 for your afternoon session yesterday. However, on the agenda, it said Wiikwemkoong unceded territory. So this morning it says it's supposed to be 1850. So what are we talking about this morning?
This morning, what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the treaty making process in Canada.
Okay.
As a group, as how that system all unfolded. And then I want to talk about the 1838 Manitoulin Island treaties.
Okay.
Then I want to talk about the 1862 Manitoulin Island treaties. And how I want to talk about it from perspective, because I know the people in the community probably know a lot about the treaty, okay? But I want to talk about it from a different perspective. One, that how the government at that time saw the people of Manitoulin Island and how they perceived them to be, because what happened was the treaty itself was very, as historians put it, very controversial, because some of the people did not want to sign on to the treaty, and how that came about and the results of that. That's what I want to talk about today. First of all, I want to talk about the treaties that right across the country, and then we'll finish off this morning at 10 o'clock about the Manitoulin.
Okay.
There, okay.
Okay, so that's your grand finale with us. Bringing it home here to the island. Okay, that sounds good. All right, so we'll start letting people in. Yeah, miigwech.
Mm-hmm.
Harry, you have hosts, so you're the only one that can let everyone in.
So I might need somebody else though.
In case
I have to step away.
Okay, you can make me co-host, or I can make you co-host. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay, give the host back, then I'll make you co-host.
How do I give the host back?
See those little 3 dots? Yeah, and then click the 3 dots.
I do.
And then it should say give host.
Nope. It just says remove pin, spotlight, edit, and rename.
Okay. I'll be right up.
It's a little after 10. It's about 10:04. Before we get started, I just want to make everyone aware of some revisions to the agenda for today and Friday for our treaty awareness. According to our our poster, we were supposed to have had a session last night with Daryl Manitowobi. Unfortunately, we had to reschedule that. So Daryl Manitowobi will be joining us through Zoom today at 1 o'clock to 3 p.m. And he will be speaking. His presentation is Territory More Than Just Reserves. So feel free, absolutely come back and join us 1 to 3 with Daryl Manitowobi, Territory More Than Just Reserves. And then on Friday for our wampum teachings, we do have Ken Miracle from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And it will be virtual. However, we'll also have an opportunity for in-person here in the community. So we will be going to the high school here in Wiikwemkoong for an in-person virtual broadcast from the school gym over there. So anybody in the community or around the community who wants to come in, because he will actually have his the wampum belts there in person as well. So we thought that'd be a great opportunity to try to get a bit of a hybrid in-person and virtual session. So again, that's Ken Miracle, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the high school here in the community. And that's coming up on Friday. So those are just a couple of adjustments that we had to make to our agenda. Okay, so we are ready to roll. My apologies, I mentioned to Bentley, I was unable to attend the afternoon session due to another meeting that I absolutely had to sit in on. But I can imagine it was engaging, as informative as Bentley has been since we've had him on this week. And again, we really appreciate Chimigwech to Bentley for providing us this opportunity to share his knowledge and information on something that we all are very interested in learning more about. So thanks to the participants as well who have been joining us for these sessions. So as I say that, we continue with our session this morning. And Bentley will be taking us from a national perspective, treaty making in Canada, and then coming back more toward home here on Manitoulin Island with the Manitoulin Island Treaty information as well. So I will say, Kijep, good morning. Bentley, again, wonderful to see you. And I'll turn it over to you. Miigwech.
Very good, Carrie. Well, this morning, what I thought was that now that I've talked about certain parts of what went on, now I'm going to sort of like sum it up to say, well, okay, this is the end result of that, and then what I'm going to do is bring it home to Manitoulin Island and Wiikwemkoong to talk about the treaty of Manitoulin Island treaties. There's two of them that were negotiated over a period of time. One 1838, I believe, or 36, and then 1862. So I'll end up talking about that later on today, this morning. That's sort of the wrap-up session. In Canada, prior to, when contact was first made, some people say contact was made the first time, 1492. Well, subsequent to that, there was a number of, because of the people felt that the newcomers were encroaching on their territory, so they reached some agreements amongst themselves, agreements of friendship and coexistence. So they established where, what do you call it, where they were living. I'm talking about our people, and also where the non-natives were living, and those were two separate communities. And like anything else, eventually the non-native people outgrew the what do you call it, the area that they were in, and started looking for new territory. Well, what happened was in that time, there was treaties that were made. It's one of coexistence and peace, and there was a number of them, and I'm not gonna go into any specific one other than to know that there was what do you call it, treaties that were there before Confederation. And after Confederation, and also after more or less, I guess, after the Royal Proclamation, number treaties started to come in. This is after the 1850 treaty that took place. Number treaties were based, there was 1 to 11. The format of those, what do you call it, treaties, was that the same conditions, if you will, I guess, would apply to number treaties as would happen, and it's based on the 1850 treaty that was signed with the government, and everything from there would take on that role as the treaties were negotiated across Canada. And majority of those treaties were negotiated, land transfers and land cessions and all of that. And a lot contained things like hunting and fishing and trapping and all those things. And a lot of them contain the same clauses that what do you call it, that are in what do you call it, that were in the 1850 treaty. So what ended up happening was that the application of the treaty policy was applied across the same country, like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC, but not all of BC, parts of BC, and other parts were not part of the treaty process. And it was all based on protection. We're going to the government saying, in exchange for your land, we're going to protect you, protect the well-being of the Aboriginal people. That I'm putting that in general context now. The treaty, what I call a treaty making system, had evolved in Upper Canada in those years before Confederation. And when Confederation was in 1867, then evolved in the years before, pardon me, further development of treaty system was based on economic practicalities. principles. Then it was on any conception of indigenous rights. During the 1870s, the United States government spent $20 million fighting Plains people. This amount was larger than the entire budget of Canada. So federal officials relied on treaties to ensure relatively peaceful consent to the Euro-Canadian settlement from the territories, approximately 35,000 indigenous inhabitants. So at that time, the estimate was that there were 35,000 Aboriginal people living in Canada. And whether that's the right number or not, it was hard to tell, because they couldn't get into the interior to really take a census of people, but they used the church, and they used the any way that they could get the information from the people on the land, which is what you call it, like the Hudson Bay managers or whatever. They utilized that same of trying to determine the real number. So they estimated at the time there were 35,000 Aboriginal people across this country. Anyway, in looking at the officials, or the Crown officials, looking at negotiating the first number treaty, was instructed to offer the terms, as I said earlier, the same as Robinson treaties of 1850. The indigenous delegations in these had followed bargaining sessions. However, it made clear that more expected Indians thought to cope with the destruction of their economies. So that there was more than the people that wanted to deal with the issue of instead of saying, well, I want to deal with hunting, fishing, and trapping. I want to deal with the economy, because the destruction of our economy is happening with today in what is being proposed in the land session. So it became that's not how the government thought. The government, because certain groups were after the continued vocations of trapping, of hunting, fishing, and trapping, because that was their economy, that was their livelihood. So what the government did is take one of those and apply it to the treaty process. And the one mostly that's been applied was that the hunting, fishing, and in some treaties not necessarily trapping, but in some treaties trapping was involved. The Aboriginal people were concerned that their base, their economic base, was being eroded. Like in the prairies, mainly what they saw was the destruction of the bison in the prairies, and this impacted on their livelihood. And And they wanted to deal with that through the treaties. And the commissioners conveniently avoided that. But not because they wanted to, because the instruction they got from their governments was that the negotiations would be the same as the ones in the treaty in the 1815 Robinson Huron treaties. It'd be the same. Now there'd be variations because of what you call where people lived in where Native people lived in the country. But to those bringing it into one size fits all, if I may, process for Aboriginal people. It created a lot of what you call it, a lot of problems, even within a process where people did not agree. People did not agree, were forced to agree. The commissioners found a way to get around it, and they got around it, and because the treaty, the way that it's written, is that I know in my treaty, treaty number 9, it says that no matter where I lived at a time of treaty, those provisions in the treaty would apply to me, no matter where I lived in Canada. And those provisions that were supposedly, which a lot of people argue that didn't happen, will say those are provisions that were benefited the government were applied across the country. And so those are some of the things that have happened over the treaty making process. And some people take a very strong view of that. Very strong view that the treaty was nothing but a land grab and the resources from our people. And it's difficult for somebody to sit down today and talk about that and saying, watching somebody else benefit from your land. And I'm sure what I'm talking about is it's like that in Canada. Lots of people think that today, that the benefit from the land does not exist for our people. If we want to do something with the land, I think somebody, Kerry mentioned that this morning. There's an individual that's going to talk about a reserve, and it's going to talk about the territories outside the reserve. And that's, I know for sure that's exactly of what we are talking about. My own chief in our, what do you call it, treaty area, that's the thing he talked about. He said he didn't want the people from our community to end up in a small chunk of land and not be able to use the traditional territory that the government had given them. So these are the things that come into play when you're talking about treaty making process. The treaty making process is about you get this and we get this. But the real what do you call it, the real treaty making process was you'll get this and we will have this. In other words, when Mary St. Clair talked about through the treaty making process, the government came in and said they owned the land. we'll give you, we'll give you, we'll give you. That was the attitude. So today, a lot of people, especially our young people, have a different point of view. And that's something that needs to be addressed. I take my hat off to people from, call it the leadership at the time from Wiikwemkoong for refusing to sign on to a treaty. I take my hat off to them. The results may be not what they expected at that time, but the results, the true results that they were after, could be had in terms of a different process. And I'm sure that's what the people of Wiikwemkoong are looking at. So if we are taught to believe that a treaty, I know it's written like that. I know it talks about in perpetuity, forever. I know it says that. But you can't, that's not how things, the Creator wanted for us to do. You know, we, some of our elders talk about it. How can our past leaders give up the land of their forefathers, the bones of their forefathers? How can they say, go ahead and take it? Because one of the treaty negotiators, and that's just in passing that's mentioned, he said, what do you mean you're gonna put us in we're gonna get this 7 square miles of land and we're not gonna have any use for the other land? That'll be the government's land. And it's almost like in passing, very quickly skim over that in the treaty process. Because the commissioner's reply was, well, you're not using it anyway. So subsequent history, whether you're in Manitoulin, in Constant Lake or whatever, we know darn well that we used all that land. We used all that land to survive. As one elder explained it to us, he said, you know, he said, when you are in the city, he says, you go to the grocery store, and you have this grocery store that is fairly big, and it has all what you need. You do your shopping, how you live, and all that. He said that's what makes non-native people survive. But us native people, he said, we use the land and the waters and everything. That's our grocery store. And the fish, the moose, the wild animals, any kind of that you want that are edible, and you eat them. So that's our store, which is a very dramatic explanation of how, what do you call it, how the need for the land and then to be restricted to 7 square miles, the difference of that. So those things in a number of treaties, and then there is subsequent treaties that have taken place since. I think the two notable ones that I did some study on are the Nishka agreement out west in BC, and also the James Bay Cree agreement. Those agreements are vastly different from what treaty agreements. They're very, very, very detailed, very complex. It talks about how governments are going to work. You know, I'm not talking about call it First Nation only, but every government, how they're going to work. So they're not tripping over each other to make the agreement work. It talks a lot about things that are not very sensitive to the First Nation, taxation, so on and so forth. But the whole process from one end to the other end was in fact all about money. And when you look at the Nishka agreement, I think it was signed in 2000, I believe it was, or what happened was, I guess you can say it this way, if I may. You can say, well, you may have negotiated a Cadillac of an agreement, but when you open the hood, there's no more. And that's some of the issues that they have as Nishka people right now. They're trying to resolve that. It's almost like the treaty process when it first started. We had all the land and everything, government comes along and take it. And they're supposed to protect us. 99% of the time, we're fighting the government who's supposed to be our protector. So it's a process that I've been involved in for 30 years, plus years. And I'm sure that people that follow are going to be involved in the same way. Until we move to a place where we're going to sit down and negotiate an agreement that is what they call more balanced. Because you remember I talked about Elder Louis Oswald talked about that. That there's things that the government has done that have benefited us. And he said there's more that the government can do to even benefit more. You may not, what do you call it, the government may not put money into the, what do you call it, the pockets of non-native people. But they have, out of the money that was raised out of resource development, Remember earlier I talked about Elijah Harper in the Manitoba legislature during the constitutional talks in 1982. And what he said was, we don't want Native people's tax money. What do we want is a fair share of the money that are derived from the resources of our lands. We want, that's what he said. So, you know, so this notion that as an Aboriginal person, we are all burdened to the tax people of Canada. Even a tax association, a taxpayers association of Canada, goes around saying that we're spending as if we're spending their money. When what do you call it? When Elijah Harper made that position, I think at that time the resource development from the country was it amounted to approximately $12 million a year. And I think the budget at the time for I'm talking about direct. I'm not talking about indirect, because indirect economy, there's a lot more money involved. Talking about direct. At that time, our budget for Aboriginal people in Canada was $5 billion. I don't know. I've never done the research, and I don't plan to now, not my age, but I don't know what how much Canada makes through indirect from the resource development. Because if you look at the economy of the country, you look at it, you gotta look, there is a science to that. You know, say you're laying down in the ground and there's a fire going on. Probably even when that fire is going on, there's probably some benefit of some kind to the government. But as soon as you go in the house and turn on the light, the government's coffers start to go cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. And they go like that for 24 hours. Don't stop. Our economies are limited. Our budgets are not, what do you call it, can't even do the things that we really want to do to help our people. So that the whole process of establishing treaties about how the government strategy is, how little can I give you so that you survive, and make people in Canada think that they as if we're spending their money. You'll never hear the government argue against what do you call it, the Tax Association of Canada. Never. They just let them go, let the people believe that we're spending their tax dollars. So that is what you call it, a bit about the economics of how that comes about in terms of what do you call it, the treaty process. And going back to the treaty process, there was provisions in the treaty, for instance, like annuities. Annuities were, I think it was $5 per head, and annuities were we're not the same all across the country. Some got $4, some got $5, and there's a standing joke amongst Aboriginal people. I know in Treaty 9 area we have a standing joke with Treaty 5 people. Treaty 5 people tell us that, oh, we got $5. And he said, well, you guys got $4 because we are better negotiated than you guys are. That kind of stuff going on. But that the annuity payment was not the same. And some of the provisions in the what do you call it, in the treaties. I know in Treaty 9, when the issue of the provisions of the other treaties, because imagine our people traveled around and found out that there were treaties and what were given in those other treaties. When our people brought that up, they said, the government said, well, you guys are not farmers, so it would be no use for us to give you a hose. So that's the kind of, what do you call it, that's kind of negotiation that went on. Although it says in the negotiations, in order in council, that the negotiations were not to change without the permission of the government. You know, up here in our, what do you call it, area, if you're from one of the remote communities, and the treaty commissioner came and what do you call it, said, well, I'll get back to you. It'll probably take a year to get back to you because of the remoteness of some of the communities. Sometimes you may see the airplane once a week. It's still like that up north. So they as these negotiations were going on, a lot of it was about the land. There's not even in some communities that the treaty party went to, they're not even mentioning anything but land. Like the land was so important to them. As long as they got agreement on the land, or they figured they had an agreement on the land, or they thought that they were at agreement with the land, they asked our forefathers to sign a treaty without mentioning any other thing. Because in the treaty, the taken up clause talks about how the government can come in, issue licenses on what do you call it, or mining, or lumbering, all those things. Meanwhile, they kept the people busy on the land while this was all what do you call it, part of the treaty. And one of the things that was put into our treaty, as an example, is that we were supposed to know when the government is taking off our land. kind of resources that were taken out, and also what kind of money was made from all that. Well, that never happened. And so there's a lot of resentment. And that's why I say I take my hat off to the people of Concon that said, no, we're not going to sign up to the treaty. But the thing is, the government kept trying many ways and saying, well, we're gonna go. They try to find a way around that, and eventually, I guess you get a number of people agreeing and a number of people not agreeing, and then eventually the naysayers were saying, convince the others the naysayers to say yes to the treaty. But it's there on record. The unceded territory of what you call it, Manitoulin, it's there on record. And I would like to just say that is something that's very, very important. Very important from the perspective of what, when we're talking about a lot of things like truth and reconciliation and all that. But I'm sure that the leadership is already dealing with the government after a long, tedious battle of back and forth. But I'm hoping that he will come to some sort of an understanding. As I read a lot of things about it, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know very much about what they call it, the 1838 and 1862 Montreal Treaty, because they're not really, from what I read now, the government would feel better to forget about it, cover it up, keep people in the process without really coming to any kind of agreement. Because as one elder, Abe Achin-Meneshkem from Martin Paul, he said, Gabriel from Martin Paul said, you know, the government said would sooner give us $1 million a year to sit around and talk about the treaty. And that's cheap. But that's what they're willing to do. They'll do that forever. Until you force them to come to the table to deal with you and deal with the people. It's not that what you call it, you want to create animosity with the government or anybody. It's got to be done. We have determined that it has to be done. Therefore, we should do it. But it's up to leadership to put them in motion what the people want. And because in our society, where we are, an Aboriginal society, there shouldn't be no ignorance of the situation. shouldn't be there. We all should be informed about what's going on. I'm not making any criticism to any leader or whatever. This is not my purpose. I'm just saying that our people, in order to support something, have to be involved. No matter how many of us, there's 4,000 of us, 5,000 of us, we can't all go to the negotiating table. We have to put our best foot forward, put our best people forward to negotiate. In today's terms, the things that we are, what do you call it, that we're looking for. Because some people I know are people that want to find a way out of where they are. If you look at our communities, we're one of the fortunate one. I'm sure the Concom's the same way. I don't know what Constant Lake we are. We have a sawmill where a lot of our people work, and in the bush industry. Not many reserves have that. But other people that have gained education, that have gotten education, would like to move somewhere else where they can do the work in the field that they were trained in, the education field that they're trained in. So it's going back to what I was saying yesterday. You have an agreement, and the people of Adamscat can tell you that in the Ring Farm or in the diamonds that they were dealing with. So there's going to be 375 people. They even said Aboriginal people are going to work in the mine. And the community agreed to that, thinking from perspective that it was that those people are going to come from the community. Well, that didn't happen. Yes, a lot of people work in the mine. Also, a lot of people work in the mine that are native, that are from other provinces in Canada. They even bring in, they even brought in Aboriginal people from other countries. So the whole thing is about how do we get around the demands and of Aboriginal people. How do we get around it? How do we? There's people constantly thinking about that. So therefore, what do you call it? It's not a very good environment to be involved in. People that you sign an agreement with are looking for ways to get around their agreement. So anyway, I wanted to share that, what do you call it, the part of what do you call it, the history that's of the treaty making process. Of course, we have the Indian Act that came along too in 1873, I believe it was. When the Indian Act came along, a lot of things again change. It's almost like you forgot about the treaty process and moving to the Indian Act right away. And always, all the time, the government having money at the end of the stick, and with your nose in the money and leading you along to another direction. Because in order to survive as Aboriginal people, that's what we need. We need to have resources. We need to have money to meet the needs of our people. We need money to deliver those programs to our people. Just like government, just like any other government, we're not different. There's a big difference as the government says, I'll give you money, but you have to do it this way. That's a big difference. If they would provide the money to us and we decide how the program they're going to run. I'm hoping that the day comes that we in this country see the government as a tax collector. We see the government as collecting all these taxes and distributing them to the rightful landowners of this country. No strings attached. And undo and put those money into work so that we can provide the services that our people need, and move forward into probably a brighter future for ourselves and our children. Because Aboriginal people, I don't know if you know it or not, but it's a big economy. We are a big economy. I never realized that, and when I was chief in Constance Lake, and we wanted the support from the town of Hearst, so that we can have a water and sewer system. So we sat down. We said, one of the things that the working group brought out was, how much money are we really putting into the town of Hearst? When you start counting of all of the sources of money, and to our surprise, at the time it was about $7 million. And you take the sources of funding and what goes in to support the economy. Even the people, the businesses in the town of Hearst were surprised. But this fight is not about with the town of Hearst or the people of Hearst or the people of Canada. This fight is about with the governments, provincial and federal government. I say fight because that's what we're doing. So at the end of the process, we can say that, we got this because we had to fight hard for it. And that would not be a statement that is wrong. It would be a true statement. And that, like I said earlier, when you talk about truth and reconciliation, and we're going down that road, and So people have to accept on all sides, I guess, if I say that, if I may say that it was wrong. Were wrongs that were done by people. And those wrongs are some of the problems that we have today that we have to resolve. Until we accept those wrongs, we can't have reconciliation. And that is, I don't see how else are we going to do it. But so anyway, it's going on 11, and I'm gonna stop there. And then when we come back, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the treaty itself, 1838, and also the 1862. Okay.
Okay, and Bentley, I don't know if you saw in the chat room too, just a couple of comments that maybe you might address or make comment to when we come back from the break. If you want to take a read, it was posted.
On the chat?
Yep,
Okay.
On the chat. So it was posted by a participant, Emilio. So he does have a comment in there, and then he has a question. So if when we return, if you want to comment on that, we can start off with that as well.
Okay, that's good.
Now, okay, so are we taking 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, 10 after.
What time? 10 after?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Julio.
Honey.
You're back?
I'm back. I never left. I never left. I sat here. I'm working, Bentley. I work here.
That's good.
Oh,
Okay, where are we here now with the questions?
okay. Okay, so we'll go to the comment. It says that Indian policy in Canada curtailed our economic development and opportunities for wealth generation through forced assimilation, land disposition, and restrictions on self-governance and economic participation. Were the treaties interpreted in such a manner that would permit these types of policies to come to be in Canada? I don't know if you're able to respond. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this type of, what do you call it? This is what I mean, our leadership is fighting against, and it seems that it's easier to do to generate wealth and as a First Nation, if you're not restricted by Indian Act, or if you're not restricted by treaty. And this is the policy itself is not it's one that evolved over a period of time. That a number of times when I spoke about it from the perspective of saying that don't worry about the politician. The politicians are more worried about whether they're going to get elected again or not. But the real enemy is the bureaucrats. And in this case, in the Department of Indian Affairs. They're the ones for the longest time have held Aboriginal people back from gaining some, what do you call it, gaining some economic wealth and gaining some independence in terms of decision making at the community level. So they're the ones that drive that. You know, just to illustrate that point, and I think I talked about it already a couple of days ago. I was involved in the negotiations for education jurisdiction with Canada. And this one bureaucrat who was involved in the negotiation, he was part of the federal team. He made the position known to us that why should we give you 100% of the money as Aboriginal people, when for us as non-Aboriginals we have to pay out of our pockets 10%, 20% of that money. And that was his position. And that's why I'm saying some of these personal positions are reflected in the government policy. The sad part of that is that the government is not doing anything about it. And because of the things that I talked about earlier, saying they're not busy, they're not keeping themselves busy by saying, well, okay, we're going to change the policy or whatever. No, they're saying, well, okay, and what do I have to do to get reelected again? Go shake more hands, kiss more babies, and all that stuff. That's all they're worried about. The bureaucracy is the one that sets a direction. And that goes through a number of committees right up to the Privy Council office. And the Privy Council office, it is finalized, and then it goes to Cabinet. And Cabinet does its usual thing, go through the document, review it, whatever the policy is, and then they approve it, and it becomes policy of the federal government. That's a very limited way of trying to identify how that, what do you call it, how that process works at that level. You know, sometimes when I listen to our politicians and it upsets me because they want to concentrate. They want to concentrate on what do we call it? What the policies of the government are. The policies are not, but for instance, like what Trudeau says, Trudeau will say all kinds of things just to get reelected again. But the real policies are developed by the bureaucrat. And that has a system of what do you call it, being going up the ladder or whatever. There's a committee for that, there's a committee for this, committee for that. And by the time it gets to the Privy Council's office, and then there's I've known 4 or 5 people in this country that decide what's going to go to Cabinet. And what goes to Cabinet is the final decision, that is the final policy. In other words, everybody's agreed already what's gonna go to the Cabinet. And the Cabinet looks at it, and 9 times out of 10, they won't argue with their own bureaucracy. They don't have time. They say, oh, yeah. It's a very, very the process is long. You know, people say the turtle is very slow. Well, the policy and the Cabinet process is even slower. So that's sort of like the policies of the government are ones that are developed by somebody else, and then we're at the whim of the headspace of those people. If those people think that we don't deserve anything, and we're not going to get anything, because that's why lots of times when there's a government, there's no policies that come out from that government. Like, for instance, the upcoming election, and if the Conservatives win, oh, holy man, you're going to do away with a lot of things, because the Conservatives are supposed to be the penny pinchers of Canada. And if you want to penny pinch, pardon me, if you look at all the programs that people are associated with are going to be cut first before other things get cut. As an example, the support for business development in Canada, you may see a cut, but it's going to be very minimal. But if you look at how much the average people get, you're going to see it very significant. It's going to be like that right across the country. And I'm not saying that because I want people to vote a certain way, or I want people to choose one party over there. No, I'm not saying that. This is a reality that we have faced. This is the history of our country. We're going to face that. We have faced it before. There's some people that made comments that are our own people. There's a government that comes in, wants to reduce expenditure. And just last night on the way home, I was listening to that new leader of what they call it, Pierre, somebody from the Tories, talking about how much money is being spent. The way he talks about it is foolishly, and you can't get away from that. They'll say anything. There's no consequence to say something. But for Aboriginal people listening to that and knowing the government, I guarantee you there's going to be cuts in the Aboriginal program. If the Tory government gets in conservative. But it's happened before. We survived it. I think there was a gentleman, I believe, I think he was from Manitoba, and I forget the name offhand. Was asked. He said, was asked by a reporter, "What do you think of the recent cuts in the budget?" He said, "Well, that's something we always live with. We always have to live with that. Because if there's a cut in this country, we're always the first ones to get cut." And he said, the government dresses it up to be that that's not the case. It is the case. And that's kind of, and this is all derived from bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy thinks about it from the perspective that they will not get any harsh criticism from the general public if the budgets of Aboriginal people are cut. And their budgets are not touched, or touched very minimum. So these are the things that we're dealing with, and we continue to deal with that. And it's a very, very harsh way of talking about things, but it's a reality. As I said, some of them are not even afraid to talk about it. They'll tell you that right in your face. And they forget a lot of things. It's not about whether they do it out of what they call it, trying to hurt the native people. I don't think so. I think it's lack of knowledge, or deliberately omitting knowledge. Because one has to think about how this country came to be, and how this country is today. Decisions that are made somewhere else, they're brought home to us. We have to live by them. And that's a lot of what I heard our people talk about. We'd like that money to come to our reserve where we are. And we would like to make the decisions how that money is going to be saved. Spent. how it's going to help our people. And the decisions that we make, it's going to be for the benefit of the people. That's what they talk about. So you know what the government has done to that, or the bureaucracy has done to that. The bureaucracy, what they've done is that they divide up the money into different votes in Parliament. And this is a control of our people. They have a vote. I don't know if it's vote 5 or vote 10. There's 3 of them: vote 5, 10, 10, and 15. Anyway, vote 5. It might be reversed. I'm not quite sure now. Vote 5 may be what do we have at our community level? The monies that we receive to run our reserves. Vote 5 is not interchangeable with anything. Whatever the amount is that is allocated is final. Then when they come to your community, they say this is how much you're getting. And when you call it, what happens is the people at the community level do not realize this. Nobody's ever told them. So what they do is they take another part, whether it's vote 10, that's for the organization. The organizations that we set up. Vote 10 cannot take that money from, vote 5 cannot take that money away from vote 10. No way they can. And similarly, how it works at vote 15. So the government has a budget of X billion dollars to run the Aboriginal affairs. And the first cost to that, what do you call it, to that budget, and every budget, is for communication, the minister's communication with the public. So if we say that the communication is 10%, they have a big, huge budget that they can use to communicate with the public. And they have a support system in their bureaucracy to help that. So no matter where you turn, you're always coming up against something as Aboriginal people. And it's just a big bureaucracy that has been set up to control us. And that's a real, what do you call it, story of Indian affairs. The bureaucracy of Indian affairs. Not set up to help you, it's set up to be against us. If it was set up to help us, we wouldn't have a lot of the many court cases that are in existence in between Aboriginal people and the government. And we talk about it from the government, and then what do you call it, when the court case comes in, and it's with the government, the bureaucracy takes over and starts putting lawyers, putting all their resources in place to fight that court case. And at the same time, this is in treaty. This is supposed to be our protector. Where is our protector? Nowhere to be seen. So that when you talk about how come the government can do this, can do that, they can do it because they have the resources to do it. And that's how the system is set up to control us. As Murray Sinclair said the day before, the government set it up so that it would be a crime to do something. Or it was a crime to speak against the government. Today, of course, a little bit more different. But today, when you see our people protesting, there's always a hint of what do you call it, that the protesters are militants. You always get a hint of that. And that's not the case. To protect what one feels is something that rightfully theirs. To protect that, that's not a crime. It's only a crime if one believes that it's something against the Crown of Canada, in this case. You know, that's for us to protect our territory is not a crime. We're not militant. We're just protecting what is rightfully ours. So anyway, the first thing I noticed when I come back to this is some of the dates that I've been quoting are wrong. And I think that the part that the important part of what they call it of the making of the Manitoulin Treaty of 1836, not 32, 86. Prior to making of the treaty, and what happened was that every spring or whatever the treaty, the governor or representative from the federal government, the Indian Affairs more than anything else, come to the community and distributed some gifts to the people. And because a lot of the people attended the meeting from Montreal Island. And because to try to deal with the issue in Montreal Island, you had to deal with the other people, the Chippewas. Two groups, there's the Ottawa and the Chippewa. The treaty itself was made so that all those people would be included. And like I said, what ended up happening, what the result of that, what do you call it, of that plan was that the leadership in Wiikwemkoong did not want to sign the treaty. And it created a wave of within government, province and federal, that these were people were the people were the chief of the two respective groups did not agree on what was being discussed. There was a gentleman by the name of Sir Francis himself admitted in forwarding them to the colonial secretary. He noted that the exchange of wampum accompanied the action and the arrangements that were talked about. And was witnessed by the Church of England, witnessed by the Catholic Church, the Methodist group were present. And what he did was, he didn't use a process of how treaties were negotiated. The process that was used was there were two memorandums that were drafted by the Crown in right of Canada, and those were speeches, but later on turned into memorandums. And those were the memorandums that were tabled with the people, the leadership. And the memorandums said that through wampum, certain agreements were talked about in terms of how the people wanted to cede the territory or supposedly give the territory to the government through wampum and friendship. But as I said, that some of the terminology that was used to describe the people of what do you call it, Wiikwemkoong, was very unprofessional, if I may call it, because what they try to let their audience, which is the non-native people, believe that we just like people were uncivilized, and what they wanted was the people to cultivate the land. They wanted to be farmers, and the people didn't want that. And because the people didn't want that, they were determined to be not accepting the policy that was really called we talk about the gaps in history. There's one of the gaps. We don't know what the people actually, we know that they said no, but we don't know if they said, well, no, we don't want this, but if we had this, there may be a treaty. We don't know that. So that's the challenge that we have, because they were willing to recognize the hunting grounds of the people. But I'm sure there was a reason for them to say no. Which makes sense, because a lot of what happened in the treaty making process was about putting you on reserve, and all the other stuff was to be taken over by non-native people. It was sold off to non-native people. If the people that were assembled with the English that their facilities, from their being surrounded by a number of fishing islands. So that takes you into a direction now different. Why were they after treaty? They're after treaty to get into the fishery, which the Aboriginal people do not want. And as Murray said, they continued their journey, and they continue to take it anyway. And that's what happened. So we're coming back today now to say, well, okay, how can we, as people, resolve that? Because a lot of people want to see it resolved, so that you can have a better life, a better relationship. I'm not saying that some of us don't have those relationships with non-native people. Yes, we have a good relationship with non-native people. But it's the government and the bureaucracy that fuels that what do you call it, that ongoing dilemma of trying to address the issues. The bureaucracy may not want to have an agreement, and then therefore that's where we get stuck. I don't know how many times, and 3 times anyway that I know of, where a minister was told to get rid of his bureaucracy. And it's not an easy thing to do. And other people will say, well, you know, the minister can tell the bureaucracy what to do. To a certain degree, yes. Because I don't know if you heard of some of the things that went on at Guam today, and that is after each election, the prime minister issues a letter to each minister, and that letter outlines what the government wants to do. And in the letter it says that, an example, the last one talked about better relations with Aboriginal people. There has to be an increased participation of Aboriginal people in decision making on issues that affect them, so on and so forth. Some of that is what they call it, even very marginal. It is marginalized. You know, and if you say, well, on issues that affect them. That statement, we don't know what it means. But if it ever comes up, the bureaucracy is going to say, well, this is what the Prime Minister meant. It's for their own convenience. So in terms of dealing with the issues that came out of the treaty, the things that you are dealing with today, and you're going to continue to deal with for a certain amount of time. I don't know how to say that. I can't tell you how long it's going to be. The government has to take a position. The government, talking about the people that are getting elected to do the things that need to be done, has to take a position that in order to move forward, you have to reach some kind of understanding that's going to implement your decisions. Not the bureaucracy. It's got to make a decision that these are the things that we're going to do. And there's certain ways to do that. There are ways. No, they're not impossible. It's just that the government doesn't want to do it. For instance, you can use the policy of the government using the ordering council. You can say, well, these are the things that we want to do. And it's going to be signed off by the government. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whatever they are. And we instruct our bureaucracy, the Department of Affairs, to do that, to implement that. And it's going to be headed up by so-and-so. You can do that. The government can do it. No, but they choose not to. They know very well that we're in the middle of what do you call it, between them and the bureaucracy. The elected officials and the bureaucracy, they know that. And I'm not what do you call it, adverse in any way to say I believe that. They like that. And that's the control, the ultimate control of the government over Aboriginal people. Is that there's no clear link between the bureaucracy and what do you call it, and the bureaucracy and the elected officials. It's an area in our country that's vague. You can't say who is responsible for what until that is cleared up in a way that I talk about. I'm not saying that's the only way, but taking those things into consideration, because that's what we want. What we want to see is that we want to clear up those issues that still haunt us today, and be able to address them so that in moving forward, we can move forward as depicted in the Huron wampum. One not to interfere with the other. If you're going to deal with truth and reconciliation, those are the things you got to deal with as a government. And us, it's our it's our, what do you call it, responsibility to bring the government to that position to begin to address those issues that our people want to see. I know, and I know a lot of young people talk to me about that. Why is this? Why is that? Why, you know, why things are going the way they're going? That's because of a lack of, what do you call it, willingness to remove that barrier that's there. That barrier, bureaucracy controlling the whole process. So this time I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for listening to me, first of all. It's sometimes I wonder if, how people can sit and listen to me, especially in the 5 hours that we spent together. But I don't want to go away, but just dropping it there, and I think that's important too. I think far more could be said about the treaty process, and so I think as we move forward, it's incumbent upon those that are, what do you call it, that are going to work in this field. It's incumbent to say, well, okay, let's sit down and talk about all the issues that you see taking place, because there's lots of them, and start narrowing down what issues are you going to be dealing with, because that bureaucracy that I'm talking about, as long as it continues to exist without a clear mandate, it's going to have very negative impact on the Aboriginal people, on us and other Aboriginal people in this country. So now's the time to get up, talk to whoever you need to talk to, relay the message, because that could not cover everything in 5 hours. Something that took place for the last 300 years, me to cover that in 5 hours, it's impossible. So I thank you very much, and
Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Now.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have any questions? I see that there's good conversation or notes being shared, were shared in the chat. Let me just make reference to Tawny Mantwabi, Fournier. I just finished reading the book by Cecil King called Balancing Two Worlds, Jean-Baptiste Signac and the Odawa Nation, 1768-1866. The book shares about the history, about our peoples and the Great Lakes regions. You can see the mindsets of the governor's Indian agents and our Anishinaabe people. It is a great read. So just inspiring people as you were speaking, Bentley, on the topics that you were speaking about, and other comments, Emilio, disregarding knowledge in an effort of self-preservation and the lack of knowledge for the rest drive the decisions for sure. So leaving nothing for bureaucracy to circumvent with policy by establishing and asserting governance over our sovereign lands, waters, and resources. And these are just discussions and questions and comments that we hear time and time again when we're talking about treaties, the impacts of treaties, whether from the historical or, how they're still impacting us today, because we're still here, we're still talking about them. And again, when we're looking at what our area is currently trying to become educated on more, is the 1850 Robinson Huron Treaty. So there's a lot of interest in it, and we know there are a lot of knowledge sharers out there like Bentley Chichu, and joining us from Thunder Bay for the last 3 days. Again, a huge meat wedge. Lots of information has been shared, education and awareness, and we know there's probably still so much that we would like to learn, want to learn, and we have to sit there and ask the questions, why do we, tap into these opportunities like this? We have an interest in this for reasons of individual reasons, or when we're looking at our future generations as well, in trying to understand why treaties happened. That's what we're all trying to learn, and I'm very happy to see everybody who participates, because the more that we come together to listen to knowledge keepers, knowledge sharers like Bentley, the more we learn, and then we can share that information, and then it will open doors to other opportunities, right? So if you talk about something here over the last few days, something might spring up in her minds that we want to get further informed on. And Bentley, you spoke earlier this week about the importance of just listening to the elders speak. Just listen. If you don't listen, you don't learn. And I think you're a true example of that. You've done that with all of us over your presentations these past few days. You spoke, we listened, and we became more aware and better educated. So I do want to thank you for being part of our treaty awareness, our virtual discussions this week. If anybody else has a comment, please feel free to turn on your mic and or your camera, and it's really up to you. If not, Bentley, any closing remarks?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody, and one thing though, I think that's very important in what you said, and I think we got to start thinking outside of the box. That we're all in this treaty, what do you call it? You know what I mean? Like the treaty path, but we have to. Treaty is only a part of what do you call it? The piece of land that we're on. That's what we're led to believe. And I always say that's not true. It's about the traditional territory of your people. That's what it's all about, and that's where we conflict with government policy and government law or whatever. So get your mindset out of that and get your mindset into the whole area, so that what you call it to bring yourself and your community to start thinking like that. You drive around and then you go onto land and then you go to what they call Wiikwemkoong. It seems like it's almost like a different world you're going into, and then when you come off again, like a different world. No, that's not what the people didn't. I'm sure the elders could agree to this. They didn't live only on the island. They used the whole area for their survival. But when the treaty came, they said, "Well, we'll talk about this land here." So everybody get out of that and start saying, "Okay, we're going to talk about the land that we use."
Mahau, Zogdo and Anishinaabe, did you have a comment? I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah, hello.
Brian,
Good morning.
can you hear me?
Are you there?
Kinundunugo. Chibigwech. Mentally. Kikotamenta Augustugo. Aha, mama.
Mahau.
No, how Brian? Maybe you guys got Brian.
And another comment just before you leave, great presentation. Thank you so much, Bentley, for sharing your wisdom, knowledge, and history. I'm excited to learn and grow as a better human being and learning about my ancestors. And that's from Jerry Newman.
Good.
Me, Gwetch.
I'm glad I can share that with all of you, and you're telling me that it's very beneficial. Right on.
That's what it's all about. All
Yeah.
right, thumbs up to everybody. Nahau
Okay.
Miigwech, we thank you.
Who's buying lunch?
I know, right? Somebody asked that question.
Okay, bye.
All right, Bama, Miigwech, Miigwech.
You're good.